Okay, the head's back, ready to be installed. First thing to do is use a product like this. Spray the head gasket, both sides. Give it a couple of coats. Make sure it's warm when you do it. So if you have to bring the head gasket inside and this inside, otherwise it doesn't stick very good. Make sure it dries completely before you install it on the block. Head gasket's on, ready for the head. Yeah. Head's on, ready for some head studs. Also, if you take these into the machine shop, have them tanked, there's two guide pins. One there and one there. Take some pliers and take those out before you take them there. Sometimes they get lost, and you're going to want those. They come in handy. For installing the head studs, make sure that you spray them down with brake clean to remove the cosmoline that's on them. Before I forget, another thing I do is I take a 5/8 inch Forstner bit and I put it in the injector holes and I turn it. You can gently use a drill if you want, but you want it seating flat and put some downward pressure on it, and that cleans out that hole. If that hole isn't flush, then your injectors aren't going to seat properly. They're going to leak. You can have all kinds of issues. And then right before you put the intake on, after you've done that, blow out your holes. Before you install the studs, make sure that you put ARP fastener assembly lube on the threads of the studs, the bottoms of the nuts, and the threads of the nuts, and both sides of the washers that go in there. Alright, we got all the nuts on. Just take a 14mm wrench, just kind of go along, make sure they're all snug. You're not torquing them down yet, you're just trying to evenly get them all snug. So these are the torque procedures given to us by ID Parts. These are for studs or bolts torque arrangement. So you'll want to follow the torque procedures, starting off with 50 pounds. Okay, so when you're doing your first torque procedure up to 50 pounds, you go 3, 2, 1, and then 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and then, 4, 3. And then you do these, this one, this one, this one, and this one. This one, this one, this one, and this one. I always do it twice. So once you've completed that, start over again. Keep doing that until all of them are 50 pounds and none of them move. Next torque procedure is 80 pounds. And then the one after that is 100 pounds. And then the final one is 125 pounds. And here you go 1, you alternate 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. When you're torquing them, hopefully you're using a clicker torque wrench. Make sure you do a double click. Confirms it. Okay, head's torqued down. We need to put on the gasket and install the glow plugs. But before we do, we're going to put just a little dab of anti-seize on there. I use the high temperature copper stuff because they do need to make contact with the block for grounding. Okay, glow plugs are installed. Ready for the next step. Next thing we did is installed the Carter lift pump and the updated fuel filter head. Next, engine assembly lube. Needs to go in all of your lifter holes. And I sacrifice a pencil, stick it in there and make sure it's well coated all the way around before you put the lifters in. Now remember, if you're reusing your lifters, in which I am, you have to put them back in order. These are the back exhaust. These are the back intake. Alright, all the lifters are in. All your valve stems were lubed. I'm going to put a little blob of assembly lube on top of here. And that will take care of that. Next thing, if you haven't taken an air hose and blew out these threaded holes, now is the perfect time. You want these to be clean when you go to put them in. And then other neat little trick I have, 1/4 inch rod. I put those in there like so, and that keeps the intake up off of the rockers as you're swinging it out. If your back is like mine and it hurts, sometimes you'll lose your grip or something. Now you can rest it on the rods rather than take a risk of dropping it and knocking a lifter off, because if you do that, it ain't gonna run. So another thing I do is in these oil journals, I squirt a little bit of oil in them, pull the pins, rotate it, because if it was tanked, it would have taken the oil out of it. And then I put a blob of assembly lube. After I get the pins back in, I put a blob of assembly lube on the lobes of the cams, and then it's ready to go. Oh, and I spray brake clean on this to get all the oil off of that. Don't touch that thing. Once that gear gets put on, you don't want oil on it, because it can lower the coefficient of friction and it can make it slip, since these are just press fit. If you're doing the EGR delete, now's a good time to put on your intake horn replacement. Okay, time to put on the intake. Just like that. Okay, now you can see a nice clean intake is on. You just pull these out. You're good to go. And there you have it. Intake's on and torqued down. It's a good stopping point for the day. Beer is calling me. Okay, at this point I'm hoping you're putting everything back on in reverse order, if you were organized. Back cover, first thing of course, for the timing system. So make sure you take that off. You can start on that side, or you can start on that side, or you can start up there, but I just do this first. And the reason for that is get this put together, and then you give it a couple of turns just to make sure you don't hear bang bang or something's binding up. As long as nothing's binding up, you can put everything else on. The two idlers, one there, one there. It's 15 millimeter bolts. They're 35 foot-pounds, and they are left hand. So go left to tight. Your timing belt tensioner bolt is 10 millimeters. Don't torque that down. It just finger tight. Make sure that this pin here, it's part of the spring. It's got to be behind this. Now the last thing, this is very important, take some brake clean, and you'll go through a lot of it, and a white paper towel, and you clean the nose of your cam really good till you don't get any more dirt off of it. And you want to do the same thing. You want to take brake clean, and you want to clean this thing thoroughly, especially on the inside. There's no keyway that keeps this in place. It's friction, which I think is a stupid idea, because if you get any oil on your fingers or anything, this will slip and it'll come out of time, and that's really bad. Bad stuff happens, and then shit starts breaking. So clean that. And another thing I like to do is I like to put a drop of blue Loctite right here. A lot of people will say that's a terrible idea. Don't use red. That would be a terrible idea. But a drop of blue Loctite, and then when you torque that down, you know that's not going to slip. So torque down your timing belt cam sprockets, 80 foot-pounds. I use an 11/16 socket, and make sure you use that wrench, because you don't want to break your pins. Okay, the high pressure injection pump has a timing mark on it. Right next to that bolt on the left side, you see that? And then there's a depression on the edge of the gear. I marked it white so you can't miss it. Also, a tip on the timing belt. I went with the heavy duty one rather than the Gates one. It was cheaper, and it said heavy duty, but right here it says we make it possible. No, it's like so tight in there, it's like impossible. I had to take the idler off just to get it on, barely. And yeah, so I don't know, get the Gates. It's more money, but it's probably a better product. Next, of course, put on the timing cover. 7 millimeter bolts, little tiny ones. Don't over torque them. And after that, you start putting the injectors in. Okay, now that the engine's buttoned up, we'll start putting the exhaust manifold and turbo back on. Okay, so here's my freshly painted with ceramic paint exhaust manifold. It's held on with 12 millimeter pinch nuts. Okay, so before you put the turbo on, you need to put this gasket on. Put like a thin coating of silicone on it so it stays in place. Do the same thing on this. Last thing you need is oil leaks. These are notorious for leaking because the bolts are hard to get to and they back themselves out. This bolt here really is if it's up on a lift, it's probably not too bad, but if this is out, you can get it from up above. If not, you got to get it from underneath, and it really sucks because as soon as you put that on, it's getting blocked by everything. And it's not a lot of room underneath there. So what I do is I just do it one at a time, get the 4 bolts on the turbo, then crawl underneath there and put this on. The wheel feed line, there's a wrench going on it. That's 14 millimeter on the top that goes into the turbo. And if you look down the side here, you can see 7/8 inch wrench. Maybe 7/8 inch wrench goes to it. You can reach it from the top if you got long arms. Otherwise, you'll have to get it from the bottom. Alright, so the last horrible thing to do with the turbo is put on the brace. Now, what I do is I cut slots just like this. So when you install it, the bolts just have to be loose, and you pull it out, take one bolt out and pull it out, loosen 2 and pull it out. Slide it back in, put one bolt in that's easy to get to, which is this one right here. And you're good to go. There you go, installed. So I showed you a hard way to install and remove the turbo and the exhaust manifold because most people don't have a specialty tool. I don't even know if they make them. But I did. So what I did is I took a screwdriver and a 12 millimeter socket, and I heated it up with a torch and I drilled a hole in it the exact same size as this. And then while it was hot, I put the screwdriver in it and I knurled the end so it won't come out. It also needs to be, so it has to be able to spin, and it has to be bent a little bit. Because the only way to get into these 2 bottom ones down here is with a specialty tool like this. I had to make it. Sometimes you have to make your own tools. I don't know. Maybe somebody makes one. I've never seen one. Put your exhaust downpipe on. You're going to need a 10 millimeter deep well to put the clamp on. Next, put on your exhaust side turbo heat shield. Next, put on your exhaust turbo heat shield. It's 13 millimeter bolts. 13. Next, install the exhaust heat shield forward, and you want this bolt right here. These are stainless steel, so if you drop that, good luck finding it because you can't find it with a magnet. So an old farmer's trick is take a piece of paper and you wrap it around the head of the bolt and then stuff it in the socket like this, and it'll stay. Won't come out. Next thing you can do is install the fuel rail. 3 bolts. You take, I think they're 15 millimeters, and just kind of loosely install this because remember you've got your fuel rail pressure sensor in the very back that you want to make sure you can hook it up, and then you can mount this. Mine, I couldn't get to it. That can get confused with number 4 injector. I mean, they'll both fit. They're kind of interchangeable. If you forget to mark them or the factory markings are gone, just remember they usually have the 2 back sensor wires for that and that. taped together. One points this direction, this one, and one points the opposite direction for the number 4 injector. So it's as long as you go with that, you're good to go. Okay, so we're waiting on a couple of injectors to get rebuilt, so we're not going to install all the injectors, but I think you kind of have a general idea. Make sure you torque, make sure everything's clean. You have a new O-ring and a new copper washer, and torque these down to, I think it's like 22 pounds. It's pretty much the same as all the intake bolts. When reinstalling your injector lines, as you can see, 1 and 3, 2 and 4. So you really can't get them screwed up. I mean, you can, but you have to know how to read. And give them a shot of brake clean on the inside just in case they got dirt in them. You don't want dirt in your new injectors. Next, install your fuel rail feed line and put in your last intake bolt. Next, you can put on is your injector return lines and rail pressure in return line, which is this. It goes in the back right there. Okay, when you're installing your return lines, make sure you press down on them. They should make a loud snap. Then use your needle nose pliers to install your clip. Once that's in, give it a pull. If it pops out, you did it wrong. Try it again. So when you put on the harmonic balancer, I just start with the top one. Just get a couple threads in it, and then you can visually see the other two. Once you get 3 in, the 4th one will go right in. Once you got the crankshaft pulley on, it's time to put on the idler. Once you have the idler on, put your power steering pulley on. Remember to put a 3/8 inch extension through the hole so it doesn't spin on you. It's got 3 10mm bolts. Next, we'll put on the fan pulley. These 2 bolts here and here, are for the bracket for pulling the engine. I just take it off and put it in the glove box. It's kind of in the way. And then don't forget there's one down here. These are 13mm bolts. Should be 4 of them. These are torqued 33 foot-pounds, and I leave, you can use a 1/2 inch also. A 1/2 inch socket in there so that when you tighten this down, it doesn't go anywhere. Now you got 2 idlers. You got one here and one there that take a 16mm or 5/8 inch bolt. They are left-handed, so you got to turn them counterclockwise to tighten them. And they're 39 foot-pounds. Next is the alternator. There's 2 bolts here for 13mm, and they're 33 foot-pounds. Okay, next thing is install the viscous heater, and that's I believe 13mm down here, and then the stupid 8mm Allen wrench bolt, but we won't tighten that one down yet because we still got to put in the thermostat, and it needs this little bracket that we can move, so we'll tighten this one down. We'll just kind of get this one little finger tight. Okay, so I get everything to this point right here, down and up and down and up and around, and then I'll put a wrench on the tensioner and loosen it up, and then pull that down and on this idler. There, serpentine belt's on. And just make sure that everything is in proper grooves, where there's grooves. You can secure your heater hoses to the intake. Put this hose on. So the best way to install this is by modifying it. What I do is I take nylon shims, and just above here I cut it straight across, and then I'll put a couple of screws on the lower side and one screw on the top side, and that way the only thing that comes off is just the top. So this bottom part comes out. It's really easy to change out, do timing belts. And I use, like I said, I use nylon shims or spacers, and then just sheet metal screws. So it'll end up looking like this. I install these first, and then I take this whole thing off, and then I cut it. Pull the two upper screws off, and then just rotate it out of the way, and then make your cut. Okay, so now with our newly modified shroud, see how nice that is? Makes it nice and open. You install the clutch fan. Use an 1 7/16" wrench in your 13mm, wherever it is, it's in there somewhere, right there. That's your 13mm socket holding it in place. And there you have it installed, nice and neat. Alright, before you get too far along, I'll put in the thermostat. That's 10mm. I usually get an extension on it so you can start it. Once it's started, you can tuck it up in there, and it'll work a lot better. Now, next thing you can do is loosen that up a little bit, put that on, and then tighten both of these down. If you are installing a ProVent system, and I highly recommend it, I take 1/2" black pipe nipples, and I thread it into here, fits nice and tight, and then I take some JB Weld, and I JB Weld the same ones in here, and then you take 3/4 inch ID heater hose, and then join them together. Make sure that, and there is a flow direction marked on it, make sure you have the flow going the correct direction. Okay, now with your thermostat in place, you put on your intake horn. It's a little easier to get to the back bolts with this off. Okay, now with the EGR delete kit, where you have the Y, you just combine these two. Can't do it with one hand. Anyways, combine those two and you're good to go. There you go. All them hoses. There's where your Y was. It's all good to go. Don't forget to plug in that and your thermostat connection. Next, put on your intercooler hose. Make sure you check them out to make sure there's not any splits or tears or punctures from poor installation. These are Samco silicone hoses. They're a good brand. I don't think I would have chose yellow, but that wasn't my choice. And before you put the air box on, take some aluminum screen and plug up that hole. That will keep the mice from building apartment complexes in your air cleaner system. Okay, got the charge air cooler hose on, your electricals hooked up, your thermostat, and your viscous heater. Got a couple of them here that'll go on the top battery, or the top air cleaner box. You're all ready to install the air box. Air box is installed. Now we move over to the driver's side. Alright. Got the intercooler hose attached to the new adapter. EGR delete. It's kind of a pain in the butt. Getting it in there, routing through all this crap, but it's in. It's done. I feel better. Here's your Tro-Vent, or Chinese Pro-Vent. I use JB Quick Weld. Put 1/2-inch PVC nipples on it. And I take this cap off and I trim off a little bit of the spring inside there so that it's a little more sensitive. That way you don't blow out your rear main seal. Okay, Pro-Vent is installed. Top line goes to your PCV. Bottom hose goes to the intake. And there you have it, all put back together.